this story is a really old story. It's a story that I grew up with as a kid. And it's a story that most kids in the UK grow up with. Now, I can't say that's the same for kids over here, because I don't know what kind of stories kids over here get told, because I didn't grow up over here. But it's an old story. And there are two different versions of it. And I think this is the oldest version I've found. And I hope that you enjoy it. Now, once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a young boy that lived with his mom. Just the two of them. Mom and Jack. And they weren't very rich at all. They struggled to put a roof over their head. They struggled to put clothes on their back. They struggled to put food on the table, but they always did. And the source of their income was their cow, Bessie. And Bessie would give them plenty of milk. And the surplus milk that they would sell at the market or turn into butter and sell that at the market in town. But Bessie was getting old and she was starting to dry up. She wasn't giving as much milk as she used to. And so Jack's mom went to Jack and said, Jack, you got to sell the cow. And Jack said, but I don't want to, it's Bessie, she's my friend. But you got to sell the cow, Jack. Take her to the market, not the one in town, because people know that Bess is an old cow and she might be drying up, so take it to the neighbouring town. And because you got to do what you have to do, Jack tied a rope round Bessie and led her to the next town's market, where people wouldn't know the cow. Well, he wasn't very happy about this. You know, it's like giving away your pet. You don't want to do that. But Jack knew that sometimes you have to make great sacrifices. And this was one of them. So Jack's pulling Bessie along down the path through the woods that he had to go through to get to the next town, and he saw this gentleman come in the opposite direction. The gentleman's got a happy stride. You can see when someone's walking, they're happy because they got this happy bounce to themselves, right? Whereas Jack was kind of like moping and kind of walking along like this. Oh no, I've got to sell Bessie. The man was whistling, and Jack heard it, and the tune was infectious, and it put a smile on his face. And the man got closer and closer, and Jack's smile got bigger and bigger. And then the man stopped when he reached Jack. He looked at Jack, and he looked at the cow, and he looked at Jack, and he looked at the cow. And he looked at Jack and said, are you going to the market to sell that cow? And Jack said, oh, I am, yeah. Would you sell me the cow? I mean, you're halfway there if you're coming from the last village, and it would save you a trip all the way to town and back again. And you might not even sell the cow there. Would you sell me the cow? Well, yeah. Let me see, how much do you think it's worth? Well, the man reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out any money. He pulled out a handful of beans that looked like this. Different colours on the same bean. And they weren't just black and brown either. As Jack looked at the beans in the man's hand, they started to change colours, blues and reds and yellows, greens. These are very special beans, Jack. Take these for the cow. And Jack's like, I can't take those for the cow. My mum will kill me. I've got to have money. I've got to have some pennies. I've got to have pennies. I've got to have. I can't just take beans for the... How can I feed my family with beans? We haven't got any money and we're very little on food. These beans, said the man, are worth way more than your cow. And Jack looked at the beans once more. And he thought about it. And the man said again, these beans are worth more than the cow, Jack. And Jack said, all right, I'll take the beans. And you can take Bessie. And he reached out and took the beans from the man's hand and looked at them. And the man took the rope that Jack handed him. And when Jack looked up, the man and the cow were gone. And all was left in his hand were these beans. He closed them up, put them in his pocket so he wouldn't lose them, and made his way back home. And when his mom saw him, she said, Jack, did you sell the cow? I did, said Jack. And you got more than a penny. I got something very different. What do you mean, Jack? We need money. Well, let me show you. The man said it was worth more than anything than the cow was worth. What did he give you? Was it something gold? No, Mom. It was these beans. And he held out his hands. And his mom looked at the beans and said, Jack, 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 what am I going to do with you? She took the beans in her hands. We're not even going to get one season now. It's too late in the year. And she threw them on the ground. Jack, his heart broke inside. He didn't mean to upset his mom. He didn't want his mom to be upset. The beans lay there on the ground as a couple of tears fell from his eyes, and he followed his mom into the house. It was night time. She cut off a piece of bread from the loaf and buttered it and handed one to Jack and kept the other for herself. And that's what they had for supper. And then they both went to their respective beds and slept. But in the morning, really early in the morning, the sun had just risen, the light was shining through, and it woke Jack up. But there was something else that woke Jack up too. There was a tapping on the glass of his window. He lived upstairs, in his bedroom upstairs, and there was no tree outside that would tap on his window, and there were strange shadows moving around his room, and when he looked, he saw that there was something growing outside of his window. He opened up the window and looked outside, and it was where his mom had dropped the beans. And they'd grown. This huge beanstalk. Not only ready for this season, but ready for, I don't know what. Well, he put his clothes on, went outside and looked at this beanstalk that went high up into all those beans. They had grown together to make one huge beanstalk. Intertwined, meshed, up and up and up it went like a ladder. And if you found a ladder up to the sky, wouldn't you want to climb it? Jack did, and so up he went. Higher and higher and higher and higher. He just kept climbing. The beanstalk was slowly moving, but it was also slowly coming to a stop. But Jack kept on going, up through the clouds. Before he went through the clouds, he looked back down, and the house was tiny. It was so far beneath him. Oh, I've never been up so high. Oh, yeah, it's really high up. But I want to go above the clouds. And so he started climbing up higher and higher and higher. Higher and higher and higher still. Above the clouds. And the clouds, it was like having a shower. A very gentle shower. It was like going through this mist. And he came out above the clouds, and there was this land before him. Where am I? What is this? Well, he jumped from the beanstalk. It was a very short jump from the beanstalk onto this land. Maybe it's a cliff that I never saw, but it's a weird cliff. There's not a cliff near our house. And he started walking. There are boulders and rocks, which is what made him think it was maybe a cliff. These boulders and rocks were laying around, and out from this one big boulder, this little short man appeared. Is Jack in it? Yeah, how do you know my name? Oh, I know a lot of things. I wondered if you'd come up here. What do you mean you wondered if I'd come up here? Well, I saw the beanstalk and I saw your house at the bottom, and I wondered if you'd be coming up. Because there's this castle down there. There's a castle, or follow this road and you come to a great castle, Jack. Now in this castle, there's some stuff that used to belong to your father. What do you mean, my father's dead? Well, I know. Your father was a good man. Looked after a lot of people. Well, this stranger, big tall fella, he came to your house, he did. It was a bit before you were born. And your father took him in. And then cleaned your father out. Stole a lot of your father's things. But don't be telling now, not even your mom. Keep it a secret, she'll be worried. But you go to that castle. Most of the things in that castle belong to you, Jack. Down here, down this road. He went to turn back to the old man. Hang on. Said Jack, where's he go? The man had vanished. He'd gone. This, Jack thought, was very, very strange indeed. But he continued to walk along the road. And he came up to this huge house. I mean, it was massive. Like Jack could have stood on his own shoulders, if you could stand on your own shoulders. Jack could have stood on his own shoulders and still not be able to reach the top of the door. So he stood there, at his normal height, banged on the door. And he waited, scratched his ear, rubbed his toe in the dirt. Was just about to bang on the door again when the door opened, and this old woman looked down at him. What This huge old woman. What are you doing here, young man? Do you know where you are? No, but I've been travelling for a long time, which was somewhat true, and I haven't had any breakfast yet, and I wondered if you could spare some food. That was also true. He hadn't had any breakfast yet. He got out first thing in the morning, put his clothes on, and climbed up that beanstalk, and he was hungry. Could you spare a little bite to eat, please, ma'am? Well, seeing as you asked so nicely and politely, I think I can. And she invited him in. Now you gotta hide though, because my husband will be back soon and he'll eat you up. He'll eat me up. He's a cannibal. Well, he's a giant, and giants have like an appetite for small children like yourself. Oh, okay, I'll hide you somewhere. Don't you worry. You finish your breakfast. And he finished his breakfast, and the old woman showed him to the oven. And she said, I'll leave the door open a little bit so you can breathe, so you don't get scared, but hide in the oven. And she helped him into the oven and shut it. Now, this oven was huge. I mean, it was massive. He was easily, he could move around in it quite comfortably. And so he sat with his knees up by his chest, with his arms around his knees, and he waited. And he heard... Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell children. Be 'em alive or be 'em dead, I'll grind their bones to flour to make my bread. Now, don't be silly, you. Come and sit down and have your lunch. It was really lunchtime when Jack had his breakfast, because he'd been walking up for so long and been walking down that road for so long. So the giant sat down and started to eat his lunch. So was it a busy night last night? She said. Are you happy? Did you do what you needed to do? Oh, yeah, I got all my chores done. Got some sheep, put them in the pen. This supper's very nice. Thank you, my dear. You're very welcome. So when they finished their supper, for it was supper for him, he asked his wife to get him his counting bags. And what he meant by his counting bags were these big sacks filled with gold coins. And so she went and got not just 1, 2 bags, but 3, 4 sacks. Put them on the table. And the giant took out a handful of coins and he started to set them down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. He couldn't count more than 5, so he was stacking them up in 5s. And he started to get tired and tired. He took out some more money into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he fell asleep, sound asleep. And Jack, in the oven, he peered around the door of the oven. And there he was, the giant was fast asleep. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. He figured that she must have gone to bed too. He snuck out of the oven, let himself down onto the floor, made his way across the floor, climbed up onto one of the chairs, which was huge for him, and reached over to that bag that the giant had been counting from. It was still half full, but Jack couldn't pick up any of the others. They were too heavy. And very carefully and quietly, he threw it over his shoulder, made his way back down the chair, across the floor and out of the castle, back down the road, down the beanstalk. And when his mother was there at the bottom, he was greatly surprised. I've been looking for you, Jack. What have you been doing climbing all the way up there? Well, Mum, I've got some money, look. But where on earth did you get that? I found it, which was kind of true. He found it on the giant's dining room table, and that little man did tell him that most of the things in that castle belonged to him anyway. You found it? Yeah, I was going down this long road and I just came across it. There was nobody else there. No other people like me there that I could find to, see if it was theirs. which the giant really wasn't one of his kind of people, so kind of not really the truth, but not really a lie either. No, it was a lie. It was an out-and-out lie. A half-truth is exactly the same as a lie, because it means you're holding something back. And if you're holding something back, then you're telling a lie. And that's what Jack did to his mom. But they really needed the money. Now, don't go climbing up that beanstalk again. Oh, my heart was beating when I saw you coming down. I'm sorry, Mom, I promise I won't again. And he didn't. Not for a while. He and his mum, that day, they went to town, and Jack bought himself some fine new clothes, got himself a little bow tie to wear, because bow ties are cool, and he was all dressed up and nice, got new boots to put on his feet. They were excited. They hadn't had new clothes in years. Jack was in sore need of new clothes, because his shirts were up here, and I can't tell you how high his trousers were. They barely fit him. Now they had new clothes. They had a new cow. They got some chickens. They were excited. They were able to look after themselves once more. But Jack, oh my gosh, that beanstalk, there it was, going up into the sky. And those new boots of his, that leather, oh, it squeaked. And when that leather on his boots squeaked, it seemed to say, boots are made for travelling. And travelling is what they'll do. And so Jack travelled back up that beanstalk, pulling himself up. Now, with all the fine food that he and his mum had been eating, the fine clothes that he'd been eating, when he knocked on the door of the castle and the old woman saw him, she didn't recognise him, all cleaned up as he was. Well, do you know where you are, young lad? You shouldn't really be here. This is a giant's castle. Go on, shoo before he comes back. But please, madam, said Jack, I'm really hungry. I've been travelling since morning this morning. I've been travelling a long, long way, and I'm so hungry I haven't eaten anything. Do you have a scrap to eat? Well, I suppose I do. Oh, a very polite boy. Come on inside. She looked carefully at Jack, but she really didn't recognise him. So she gave him something to eat, and then she hid him in the oven like before. Now, my husband, when he comes back, you stay quiet. Don't make a noise. You'll eventually fall asleep and you can leave. Now, we had another lad here and he stole some money. You be good. You don't do that. I'm giving you some food out of the kindness of my heart. When I could leave you out here for my husband to eat. Oh, no, I promise. I'll take nothing. And Jack hid inside the oven. And sure enough, it wasn't long before... Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell children. Be 'em alive or be 'em dead, I'll grind their bones down to flour to make my bread. And it's... Stop it. Come and have your supper. It's on the table, all ready to go. A whole mountain of mashed potatoes. And I know you love mashed potatoes. Oh, I do. And so he sat down and the two of them ate together. And they drank together. And then at the end of the meal, the dragon rubbing his eye, the monster, the giant rubbing his eyes because he was so tired, he looked at his wife and said, Wife, could you bring out the goose that lays the golden egg? Well, of course I can. And off she went to get the golden goose. Golden goose, thought Jack, that lays a golden egg? What? And out she came with this golden goose, and Jack's peering from the oven, just peeking out. He could see this golden goose. And he's... Wow. And then the giant looked at the goose and said, Lay. And the goose... And out came a golden egg. Jack almost blurted something out. He was so surprised. He shut himself back in the oven, leaving it open just a tad. He's like, I gotta wait. That's amazing, thought Jack. And he listened as the ogre kept saying, Lay for me, my precious. Another egg was laid. You could hear the giant chuckling. And then he said, Oh, lay another one for me, my precious. Another golden egg was laid. Egg after egg was dropped. And Jack listened until he heard the giant snoring. And then he carefully and quietly climbed out of the oven, down onto the floor, across the floor, up on the chairs, up to the table, and looked at the goose. The goose looked up at him. It was just about to open its beak, but Jack knew how to look after geese and chickens, and he grabbed its head and kept its beak tightly shut. He then scooped up the goose, tucked it underneath his arm, and then ran from the building. Ran from that great castle. Ran all the way down that road, but when he got to the top of the beanstalk, he had to let go of the beak of the goose, and it cried out, but they were far enough away from the castle that the giant didn't hear. And he made his way down. And halfway down he could hear his mom calling out, "Jack, you wicked boy, I told you not to go up there again." And Jack's like, "It's all right, Mom." He's holding on to the goose and trying to get down nice and carefully and slowly. "It's all right, Mom, I'm fine, I'll be all right." And when he got down to the bottom, she said, "What have you got under your arm?" "I got this golden goose, Mom, and it lays golden eggs, look." And he set it down on the ground and said, "Lay for me, my precious." And it squawked and laid a golden egg. "Now, where did you find that, Jack?" "Well, I just found it," he said. "Just found it, Mom?" "Just found it, you say? Now, I don't want you going back up there again, all right? Now, you listen good. You're not to go up the beanstalk again." "All right, Mom, I promise." "Till tomorrow, or the day after," he thought. Well, time passed, and they lived on the income of the golden egg. They were able to help out other farmers that were less well off than themselves. They shared their wealth with others. They helped hire people to work on their farm as it grew. It was a wonderful thing, a wonderful gift that they'd been given, or that Jack had taken. Well, it was getting towards the end of the summer, and Jack was looking at that beanstalk, knowing that it wasn't going to stay up there for much longer. It was old and weak, but considering the size of this thing and how light Jack was, he thought he'd be all right going up one more time. And so he disguised himself. He didn't put his fancy clothes on, he muddied up his face. He went to borrow somebody's old cap that he put on his head and climbed once more, made his way to the castle, knocked on the door. The old woman looked at him. "So, what are you doing here, little boy?" "Well, I've been travelling a long way, and it's the first place I've come to. I've been travelling down that road." He pointed in the opposite direction that he'd come from. "I'm so hungry, I haven't had anything to eat all day. I was wondering if you could spare a snack to eat, a little bite to eat, if you wouldn't mind, please." "Come on in, then," she said. "Come on in." And then Jack went. She put him in the oven, told him to be quiet after he'd eaten. "Don't say a word." "I won't," he said. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell children. Be 'em alive or be 'em dead, I'll grind their bones to make flour for bread. Sit down and have your supper. All right, all right, all right. So the giant sat down for his supper. And at the end of the supper he called out, "My dearest darling, will you bring out the harp that plays itself?" And she got the harp that played itself. And he sat it on the table. And he whispered, "Play for me, my dear." Now this harp, when Jack peered out of the oven to look at, was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was the size of a Celtic harp, so it wasn't huge, it wasn't a big harp, but it was made of gold, or gold-plated. But on the faceplate of it, the bit that you bring into your chest, there was this beautiful face of this woman with long hair. And as soon as the giant said, "Sing for me," the harp, the face on the harp, moved and it began to sing and the harp began to play itself. And it wasn't very long before the giant was fast asleep. Jack climbed out of the oven, made his way down onto the floor, across the floor, up the chair, onto the table, and he grabbed that harp. But the harp yelled out, "Master, I'm being stolen!" He said, "Shh, shh." And he ran as fast as he could. He leapt off the table onto a chair, off the chair onto the floor, and ran as fast as he could. Well, the giant woke up. What was that? And again the harp called out, "Master, master, I'm being stolen!" And the giant, "What?" And he saw Jack just as he was running out of the doors. Well, you know what it's like when you wake up suddenly and unexpectedly. He wasn't fully awake, and he stumbled and tripped over the chair and fell down. The whole castle seemed to shake beneath Jack's feet as he went out through the door. He ran down the road. "It's that little boy again, isn't it? He snuck in here too. I thought we were going to catch him this time." The giant and his wife ran after Jack. Jack ran as fast as he could, the harp calling out, "Master, master, I'm being stolen!" All the while, Jack leapt onto the beanstalk and grabbed hold of it, and it started to sway with just his weight. He climbed down, down, down faster, and as he got closer to the bottom, he called down to his mother, "Mother, mother, bring an axe quickly!" His mother's like, "Jack, I told you not to climb up there before. Mom, bring an axe now!" And he climbed down as fast as he could. All of a sudden, the beanstalk started to sway even more. The giant must have reached the top, and he was climbing down. He could hear the bellows of the monster. Jack jumped off the last few feet, set down the harp, took the axe from his mother, and started to hack at that beanstalk. And the beanstalk, it swung even more wildly still, and then the whole thing toppled. There was a huge crash when the giant landed. This beanstalk was so tall that it created a crater. The giant's body was just smashed to bits. There was nothing visible there at all. The beanstalk, most of it had destroyed, spread itself all out. And it rained almost immediately afterwards. And that great crater that the giant had made turned into a lake. Jack and his mom, they ran inside. His mom was furious at him. "Jack, what do you think you're doing?" she said. "What are you doing? I told you not to go up there." "Well, I wasn't going to go up there again, Mom, but it was, the last time. It was getting old and weak. But I came down with this, look." She hadn't seen what Jack had brought down this time. And she looked at Jack, taking it from his hands. "Jack, where did you go? Where did you get this?" And Jack told her, "Your dad gave this to me many, many years ago. And this man, he came and stole from your father. And your father died shortly after. So is this where you've been getting the goose and that money, Jack?" "Yes, Mom, it was. These are things that your dad gave to me." And Jack and his mother, they embraced. They held each other tightly. And they all lived a very long time ago. That's the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Let me just take a small drink. Cheers. Nice cup of tea for an English story, huh? Well, the next story I'm going to tell you isn't from England. This is a story from Denmark. And who came from Denmark? That's right, Hans Christian Andersen. Now, Hans Christian Andersen wrote a lot of stories. You've probably heard of The Little Mermaid, The Tinderbox, The Little Match Girl. Those are some of the stories that are well known today. The Emperor's New Clothes, that was Hans Christian Andersen. There are many, many stories that Hans Christian Andersen wrote. And this is one that's actually based on another folk tale. And it's called An Old Story Retold, Hans the Dullard. But when I read this story, I fell in love with it, which is why I'm going to share it with you today. This story is about... I'm not going to tell you what it's about. We know it's about Hans already. Once, there were two very well-read brothers. They were the sons of a baron, a very rich baron, and a very rich baroness. These two sons were very well-read. The eldest son, he could read the Latin dictionary forwards and backwards, inside and out. He knew everything in that Latin dictionary. He was very, very smart, very intellectually smart, very book smart. And he would often read the newspaper to keep himself up to date with the times, what was going on in the world. Now, the middle brother, he wasn't the same kind of smart as the oldest brother. The middle brother, he was into politics. He was very much into politics. He read all the bylaws of the town that they lived in. He knew all of the legislation of the kingdom that they lived in. He knew everything. He would often put his own spoke in the wheel of local government. He was also very good at needlework. I don't know why, but he was. Fine fingers, maybe, not the stubby short things that I've got. Maybe that was what it was. Well, the kingdom was ruled by a king and queen, and this king and queen had this daughter. And this daughter, they thought she was, well, let me put it this way. She was very high-spirited and very forward-thinking and individually minded. She loved life and liked to live it to the full. Now, when the king and queen began to invite dukes and lords who were unmarried, the sons of dukes and lords who were unmarried, and princes and knights, the highfalutin knights, of course, not the sundry knights, she realised, this princess, she realised that they were trying to marry her off. And she wasn't into the idea of being married off. Now, she was a smart girl, she was a polite girl, and when she went to her parents and to tell them that she didn't really want to get married just now, that she really didn't want to marry any of these people that she was being introduced to because they were so arrogant and stuck up or just downright boring. She didn't want to say that to her parents, so she just went up to them and said, "Mummy, Daddy, I realise that you're trying to find a suitable suitor for me, a suitable beau, a suitable partner for the rest of my life, but I was wondering, if I am to be married, can I marry someone that can speak well of themselves? Someone who can put a full sentence together? Something that's interesting?" "Well, of course, my dear, we can do that." And so a proclamation was made. A proclamation is where a statement by the ruler of the country would be written down, and many, many copies would be made, and they would be distributed all over the kingdom, and town criers would be like, "Hear ye, hear ye! The king and queen announce that their princess, their daughter, shall be married to someone who can string a sentence of words together that are not boring." Yeah, that's what would happen. And all these people would hear about it, including the Baron and the Baroness's two eldest sons. Now, they went to their father and said, "Oh, father, can we borrow a horse, please? Can we have a horse so we can ride to the castle to meet the princess? Because, you know, our words, we're very good at elocution and enunciation, and we speak words well. They just roll off our tongues, and we'd like to marry her." And so the father said, "Well, aye, sure, lads, I think that's a good idea." So they went down to the stables. The eldest son, he was given this beautiful black stallion. And the middle brother, he was given a beautiful white charger. Now, when they went into the stables, there was Hans. Hans stood up out of this big pile of straw and dusted the straw off himself, and he looked at his brothers, who were dressed up very nicely, and he's looking at them, he's like, "Hey up, you boys are all dressed up nice, you going to a party?" "No, Jack, we're going to see if we can marry the princess." "Yes, we're going to marry the princess, Jack. That's why we're all dressed up. The princess has said, a proclamation has been sent out that anyone who can string a sentence of words together stands a chance of marrying her." "Oh yes, and we think that we stand a very good chance of marrying her, Jack." "Oh, I want to come, I want to come." He brushed off his coat sleeves. "Jack, you can't string a sentence of words together, you barely know your name." And the two brothers jumped on their horses, kicked up a whole bunch of dust, and galloped off. Hans turned to his dad and said, Dad, we got another horse I could use to go join my brothers. No, Jack. Your brothers are right. You're not very good at putting words together. Just forget about it. And his father left. And so Jack Hans, he was there in the barn, and he looked at his goat. He owned a goat, and it was not one of those little baby goats that you sometimes find in ice cream stands or a farm stand or something like that. No, this was a full-grown goat. It was a big goat. And Hans, he looked at it and thought, oh, I bet I could ride that. And so he stepped over it, and his feet were just off the ground, just a tiny bit off the ground. And so he started to ride after his brothers on the goat, holding the goat by its horns. Oh, it's a bit bumpy, a bit sore on the bum. Oh, never mind. And off he went, after his brothers. Now his brothers, although they galloped away, they had stopped galloping and they were just walking. They were going to enjoy the ride, the slow ride or trot to the castle. And it took a little while, but Jack, on his little goat, caught up with them. Hey up, brothers! Here I am! It's good to see you! And they turned, oh, Jack, Hans, we told you not to come. There's no point in you coming. You'll never win the... No, I want to join you. Come on, it's like a brotherly trip, eh? It'll be grand. Hey, oh, what's that? Jack saw something on the ground. And so he climbed off the goat and he went and picked it up. It was a dead crow. And as he picked it up, the wings fell open. Hey up, brothers, look at this. It's a dead crow. I'll take this with me and give it to the princess as a gift. And he folded the wings up and stuffed it into a bag that he had with him. Yes, Jack, why don't you do that? Yes, Hans, why don't you do that? And you know, make our job a lot more easy, won't it? Yes, it will. And off they rode again for a short while, leaving Jack, Hans, in the dust. But Jack climbed back on his goat and eventually he caught up with his brothers another time. Brothers! Hi-ho, here we go, we're all together again. His brothers were rubbing oil on their mouths. They tried to ignore him. Oh, why were they rubbing oil on their mouths? Oh, it's so when they were speaking to the princess, the words would come out much more smoothly. Yeah, I know. That's the kind of guys that they were. Oiling their lips, so the words would come out more smoothly. Jack Hans stopped on his goat. What's this? Brothers, I found something else. He jumped off the goat and picked up a clog, a wooden shoe. Look at this, it's beautifully decorated. Look at the way it's painted. Oh, yeah, it's lovely. Not too much wear on it either by the look of it. Jack, just leave it there. Yes, Hans, just put it down. There's only one of them there. Ah, but I might find its twin further up the road and then I'll have a new pair of old shoes. Ha ha! And he shoved it into his bag. His brothers clicked their heels into the horse's side and off they both galloped again. And Hans was left there, climbing back onto his goat. Oh, I've got to get the saddle for this. Oh, it's a bit sore. And off he rode. And eventually, for the third time that day, he met up with his brothers. Here we are again, the three of us together like brothers should be. Oh, my word. Jack, just stop. We're practicing our words. Yes, Hans, we're practicing our words. This time they were putting lavender on their tongues, so that when they spoke, not only did the words come out easily on the oil, their voices would smell beautiful. Yeah, I know. Jack stopped suddenly and climbed off his goat and went to the side of the road. What's this? He said. What's this? And he scooped up in his hand some... Look at this. This is the finest clay I've ever seen. And he scooped up another handful. Jack, that's just roadside mud. Yes, Hans, it's roadside mud. Put it back. But he didn't. He put it in his pockets. He filled his pockets up with that runny mud. His brothers rode off. They didn't stop galloping this time. They galloped all the way to the castle. And Hans climbed back on the goat and... Oh, it's a bit rough. But I'll get there in the end. Well, the brothers arrived there a full hour before Jack did. There were many, many people there in the courtyard of the castle. All the men that wanted to try and marry the princess, they were all in columns of 7, all up close to one another. The reason for that was so that they wouldn't fight. I suppose it would work, but they didn't feel very comfortable, I don't think, either. Up so close against other people, you know, personal space, personal space. The people from the village and the town, they had also come into the great castle walls, into the great courtyard, and they were looking at all these potential suitors, these potential princes, looking at them all. Oh, he looks like he might be someone that the princess might like. Oh, what about that one over there? That looks like somebody the princess might like. There are other people that are like, princess isn't going to like any of these people. They're all going home. She doesn't want to marry any one of them. And it looked that way as person after person came out of the great hall with their chin stuck to their chest, having been shooed away by the princess. Well, Hans eventually caught up with his brothers. Hey up, brothers, we're here again! Woohoo! Oh, yes, Hans, it's good to see you. Yes, Jack, it's good to see you, I suppose. Ah, what a grand day. He looked around and started waving up. Hello, how are you doing? Stop that, Jack. Yes, Hans, could you please stop that? You're drawing attention to us. Ah, but they're having a fun day and so am I. Hello, it's nice to see you. Yeah, brilliant day. Look, nice weather. Oh, yes, beautiful day. All these, hey, up. Well, eventually it was the eldest brother's turn to go into that great hall. And as he stepped in through the great doors and he looked about himself, he started to sweat. He thought it was nervousness. At first, you know, meeting the princess for the first time, that's a big deal. And he looked around and he saw these people there with parchment and paper, ink and quills and pens. They were writing things down. Wow, it's awfully hot in here. And then he saw in the corner there was this stove, and the stove was roaring. Oh yes, said the princess, my father is cooking poulon. Your father's doing... hello, I mean, your graces... Oh, bother. Oh, another one that can't put a sentence together. Thank you for coming, goodbye. And he left, with his head hung down, his chin on his chest, just like all the others. And then the middle brother went in. And he walked in, he had a cap on his head, and he took that off because it was hot. Oh, it's hot in here. He saw the stove. Hello, your princess, your highness, hello, it's really hot in here, isn't it? Yes, my father's cooking poulon. Poulon, what? Well, hello? Another one that can't string a row of words together into a sentence that's coherent and interesting. Thank you for coming, goodbye. And off he left. The princess jumped down from the throne and skipped around the room, watching all these people writing down what had happened, the words that were being said. You see, the idea was that these scribes who were there, they were writing everything down so that it would go in tomorrow's newspaper to be printed in the news. Bizarre, but true. And so in came Jack. He was the next in line. So in he came. Not walking, but on his goat. Whoo! It's hot in here. God, blimey. Oh, it's really hot in here. How do, princess? How you are? I'm doing fine. Yes, my father is cooking poulon. Oh, a nice bit of chicken, eh? Can't beat a good bit of chicken. You know what I have got, though? And he reached into his bag. I got some crow. Do you think I could cook some crow on your stove with your father's chicken? The princess was taken aback. Well, I suppose so. She tried to catch him out. But we don't have anything you can cook it in. Oh, that's all right, princess. I think I got something in here. And holding the crow one hand, he reached into the bag with his other and took out the clog, the wooden shoe. And he started to shove it into the clog. Now, the princess, she thought this was a bit bonkers. She thought it was a bit mad. She thought it was kind of funny. And she thought, that's a very unique dish you have there. Do you have any sauce for it? By golly, I do, said Jack. And he reached into his pockets and he took out the gravy, and Hans poured the gravy over the clog, the shoe, and all over the crow. Where can I put it? He said. Just give it to one of the servants, they'll sort it out. He took the shoe, You're the first one in here that can string a sentence of words together that are quite interesting, actually. It's a very unique dish you have there. Ah, it is, isn't it? Maybe we can eat them together. Oh, I need to introduce you to the scribe, the head scribe. You see, everyone is writing down everything that is done and said in this hall. Is that so? Well, then I should pay my respects to him. She was hoping to trip him up, make him more nervous. But he just smiled at the princess, looked up at the scribe and took a deep bow. As he bowed, the princess told him that the head scribe didn't like anything she said or did, although he wrote down everything she said or did anyway. And Jack said, well, I must pay him my compliments. And he reached into his pocket and pulled out a big piece of that mud and hurled it at that head scribe. And it splattered all over his chest. Well, the princess, she looked at Hans, she looked at Jack, and she said, I never thought of playing such a trick. Could you teach me how? And she held out the crook of her arm. And Jack took the crook of her arm in his. And they walked off to meet the king and queen to get married. Now, I don't know if they lived happily ever after, but what I can bet your bottom dollar on is that their relationship was filled with so much fun and frolics it should have done. And I hope that it did. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. This is Simon Brooks, storyteller, signing out. Bye. Beans and coins and a bower on drum. Thanks for being here. See you.